Why I dropped to her knees on the ground and began to bow before Lucian. He merely continued to watch her in silence, contemplating a fitting punishment for having attempted to poison him. I lifted her head, but couldn't bring myself to meet. Lushing in the eyes. Her gaze heavy with remorse, and with a shaky voice she braced herself for any punishment. She was even ready to die. Lushing sat in the train seat, crossing his legs, stretching his hand to the side with a composed expression. Asked her to take a seat so they could discuss this. I bowed her head once more, and her eyes welled with fear and shame. She couldn't stop herself from sweating and blushing deeply. She declined because she knew what Lu Cheng wanted to hear. She was prepared to confess everything. Lu Cheng fixed his gaze on her with intensity and with an expression full of certainty. Questioned if the people from the Gato gym had been the ones behind the assassination order upon hearing this and couldn't help but be caught off guard with a startled expression. She admitted it by inquiring if Lu Cheng had already discovered the truth. He set down the jar containing the poison on the table, folded. His arms looked away and disclosed that he had uncovered this roughly a month ago. But at this point, it was irrelevant. He wanted to know what rewards they had dangled before her. She began to sweat even more, and with an earnest look, stuttered, confessing that they had offered her 50 million. Lushing grabbed the jar of poison in his hand, tossed it into the air, causing it to spin in mid-air. He studied it with a tranquil expression and mused that the reward must have been substantial, since after all, a life like his carried great worth. Asking her if she knew the price of this jar. Didn't dare lift her head, and with a sorrowful expression explained that a single drop of this poison was valued at 5 million, and the jar contained at least 15 drops. Lu Cheng grasped the jar with 2 fingers, raised it closer to his face, analyzing it, and with a smirk thought that they had truly invested heavily in this scheme. After saying this, he inquired if she had anything left to disclose without a second's hesitation. I placed her hands on the ground, bowed her head, prostrating herself before him. She understood that her crimes were beyond forgiveness. She only pleaded not to be sent back to the military barracks. She was prepared to face death. To atone for her actions, Lu Cheng observed her closely, and his eyes began to glow with a blue energy. He had no intention of executing her or returning her to the military barracks, but instead, he required her to repay her mistake with the task. Several hours later, at the high-speed train station, many taxis began to flood the area. The sky was clear and the day was brilliant. At that moment, Lushing's train pulled into the station and the doors slid open. The train attendants wished him a pleasant journey. Lushing, with one hand tucked in his pocket, stepped off the train, and soon a crowd gathered around him. Everyone was stunned to realize that this train route had been reserved solely for him. Lushing strode toward the exit, unbothered, as if nothing had transpired. Paying no mind to the onlookers among the crowd, stood Lyde's acquaintance to seize parents upon witnessing Lushing still alive. His eyes widened in bewilderment, and he couldn't help but grit his teeth in fury. A short while later, Lyde, now hidden beneath a hood, stepped off the train. The man turned around, and upon spotting her, his face twisted in panic and rage, demanding to know what she was doing and how Lushing had managed to survive. She merely lowered her gaze and approached him with a candid expression. She admitted that she had never gotten the chance to act. He moved closer and couldn't help but glare at her with hostility. He couldn't comprehend why she had called him or why she hadn't followed in the entire time. Lai remained composed. She gets close to him with a calm expression, explaining that Lu Cheng had entrusted her with a task. But just before the man could process anything, Lai Ai embraced him and hurled herself toward the train with unwavering resolve. She declared that they would perish together. Upon hearing this, he was struck with disbelief, and his eyes clouded with confusion. As he struggled what was happening, both plunged into the train tracks, and Lai Ai tightened her grip on him, rendering him motionless as the high-speed train rushed forward and surged toward them at full speed. Witnessing this, the crowd rushed closer. Everyone was aghast to see that they had thrown themselves onto the tracks. Lu Cheng watched the scene unfold, and with a self-assured expression he concluded that this time Lai Dai must have completed the mission successfully. He had just embedded a seed of mental power in her consciousness. This was quite an advanced technique. Akin to hypnosis, Lu Qiang extended his hand, and his palm emitted the same blue energy. As the origin of mental prowess, he began examining his palm in silence before. He had always overlooked this gem that was psychic strength. If he could wield 8th-level mental force properly, his overall capabilities would surge significantly, including mind deception and willpower dominance. When Lushing sowed the seed and deceived her thoughts, her eyes shifted to violet, and she lost control of her consciousness. Essentially, it involved manipulating the enemy's 5 senses, fabricating a reality they were meant to perceive just like a dream. The seed of mental strength he had implanted and twisted was merely fulfilling his absolution. Moments later, the train ran over Lai's remains, ending her and her parents' existence, leaving only mangled and indistinguishable bodies. Paramedics arrived. 2 men placed the remains on a stretcher and proceeded to transport them to purify her sins. Offering her life alone would suffice for at the end of it all. A fault was still a fault, and there must always be retribution. Now that Lu Cheng had done this, he realized his heart had become colder. Lu Cheng departed from the train station with no trace of guilt and began his walk. If, in this way, he could safeguard those dear to him, he did not mind his heart growing even colder. Noticing the lion's desire for play, he resolved to accompany her to the very end. Meanwhile, in the Quafu residential district, specifically at Lu Shang's residence, Governor Zi arrived. Witnessing this, Lu Shang's father pulled open the door, turned back, and with enthusiasm, urged Lu Shang's mother, Zio He, to prepare tea for their guest. Governor Zi, hands clasped behind him, stepped inside with a warm grin, inquiring why such formality when they were longtime friends, mentioning that today, a distinguished figure from the military sector was set to arrive in the city of Bei. He had come to welcome him and, on the way, chose to visit Lu Shang's father. Then explained that Lu Shang himself was returning home today. Upon hearing this, Governor Zi waved his hand in delight, unable to suppress a smile. Who would have guessed that today, Lu Shang would also be coming back? What a fortunate day for him, as he would get to enjoy Mrs. Lu's home cooking once more. Lu Shang's father, one hand behind him, placed the other on Zi's shoulder, closed his eyes, laughing, and remarked, Governor Zi was accustomed to mountain and sea delicacies, so a simple homemade meal felt like a novelty to him. Zi, eyes shut, revealed a gentle smile. In his opinion, Mr. Lu was far too humble for raising a national martial arts champion was no simple feat. Zion. He then appeared, covering her mouth with one hand while gesturing with the other, implying that such praise was unnecessary. Some time later, Governor Zi and Lu Shang's father took their seats. Zion. He brewed green tea for their guest and someone placed it on the table. This individual was none other than King Lu Shang's younger sister. As she balanced the tray in her hands, she approached Zi with a bright expression and, smiling, invited him to have some tea. Zi took hold of the steaming cup and with an earnest look brought it to his lips. Preparing for a sip, Closing his eyes, he reflected on how peculiar Lu Sheng was before. Z never paid him much mind, but each encounter left him astonished. He recalled the fearsome Lu Sheng slaughtering criminals. A long time ago, it had been Lu Sheng who eradicated the entire Mongolian gang, one of the nation's most notorious criminal groups. He recollected Lu Sheng delivering a devastating blow to a specter, piercing a massive hole in its form. He remembered how Lu Sheng shattered records in the Tower of the Seven Saints. He reflected on Lu Sheng's victory over the Jidao twins, one of whom had morphed into a beast, yet was still no match for him in the University Martial Arts Championship. He had outclassed the Jidao twins and the prodigy Sheng, securing the title of champion. He imagined Lu Sheng's piercing gaze. He took a sip of tea, set the cup down, eyes glimmering with awe. This boy never ceased to amaze him. 2 years had passed since their last encounter, and by now, he assumed Lu Sheng had attained the master level, an unfathomable achievement. He placed the teacup aside and with a satisfied expression began to study his own reflection. Though back then, he had only come to commend Lu Sheng as a routine investment, establishing connections with extraordinary talents could yield returns tenfold or even 100-fold. Beside him sat another man relishing a fine cup of tea. Z's gaze shimmered with admiration, and he couldn't help but smile. He had seen a seed that had now become a gigantic tree. President Siu was already starting to enjoy the benefits of his investment, and he was preparing to be the vice president of the Martial Arts Association of the capital. Lu Sheng's father began to look at the watch on his wrist, and with a surprised look remembered that Lu Sheng had returned from the military district, calculating the times. He presumed that his son would arrive soon. Upon hearing his voice, Z's opinion surfaced in his mind. Trans began to scrutinize him, and couldn't help but feel somewhat astonished with a bewildered expression. He questioned him if Lu Sheng had truly enlisted in the military district. The father placed his hands on his hips, shut his eyes, and with a grin explained that Lu Sheng had mentioned the university felt dull to him, and that's why he had joined the army. Some time ago, he had stated that he intended to transfer to the Eastern Military District. This was sheer recklessness, since he had barely been in university for less than half a year, and had already ventured into the army, which was incredibly perilous. And he remained silent, listening without interruption. He couldn't help but close his eyes and smirk upon realizing that Lu Sheng wanted to take his family with him to the Eastern Military District. He assumed that he was excelling in the army. To him, Lu Sheng was like a dragon that had plunged into the sea. It wouldn't take long before he soared into the sky. At that moment, a sound echoed through the window. Ziping then turned his head towards the window and with a calm expression recognized that this sound was the car horn. He rose to his feet, turned his back to them, and with a stern demeanor stated that it must be the vehicle of the brigade general from the district of Dongning province who had probably come to fetch him. He excused himself as he went to receive the esteemed guest, Lu Sheng's mother, who had her hands on her abdomen began to display a soft smile. The father raised his hand in farewell, and with a delighted expression chose to accompany him downstairs to greet the guest so as not to seem impolite. Once they exited the house, a large number of guards rolled out a red carpet in front of the entrance and lined up the moment they saw the overwhelming presence of bodyguards. Onlookers started to gather, curious about which significant figure was about to arrive. At that moment, a lavish military vehicle pulled up in the area and halted right in front of Lu Sheng's residence. Upon witnessing this, Z Opinion's eyes widened in astonishment. The prestige of Old Cayenne was something that evoked his envy. Every time he laid eyes on it, Lu Cheng's father was left speechless at the grand spectacle. The brigade general Kaiyan, a dashing and poised man, opened the door and stepped out. Upon seeing Kaiyan, Xi Opinion broke into a smile and, with an exuberant expression, started waving at him instead of responding to the greeting. Kaiyan turned to him, raised a finger to his lips, and with a grave expression, signaled him to lower his voice upon witnessing this. Xipinian couldn't help but feel slightly perplexed. Kaiyan placed his hands behind his back, approached the rear door of the car, shut his eyes, and saluted the general, after which he proceeded to open the car door. Xipinian found himself frozen in place. His forehead began to perspire upon realizing that there was someone else inside the car, someone of a higher rank than old Kaiyan from the military district. He quickly turned and, with a solemn expression, gestured to Lu Cheng's family to return inside the house. He had no clue why such a high-ranking general have arrived to him. This was utterly peculiar. With such an influential figure present, it was best for Lu Cheng's family to retreat indoors. He had to hurry and take his place in line to welcome the general. Lu Cheng's father was slightly baffled, but without a second thought heeded the instruction. He placed a hand on Lu Cheng's mother's shoulder and, with a startled expression, decided it was wiser for them to step back so as not to interfere in the reception of the commanding officer. The mother shut her eyes, clenched her fist, and felt a sense of relief knowing that Lu Cheng had not yet arrived. King glanced to the side, and upon witnessing what lay before her, she couldn't help but be stunned. At that instant, Kaiyan swung open the car door and the general emerged, making his way toward them. Lu Cheng's family prepared to depart, but in that moment, with an astonished expression, he requested them to wait. This general was none other than Lu Cheng. He gazed at them with a composed expression and remained silent. Upon seeing Lu Cheng, King couldn't hold back her excitement. She shut her eyes and, with a grin, dashed toward her brother to embrace him, admiring him, by saying that he looked excellent in the uniform. Lu Cheng began to observe her, and his eyes filled with delight, causing him to start grinning. He placed his hand atop his sister's head, started to stroke it, mentioning that she had grown significantly and had become quite the young lady. King, who had her eyes shut, started to beam even more with happiness, and she couldn't help but begin to flush upon hearing her brother's praise. Lu Cheng and King started conversing with each other, while the parents, who were standing at the doorstep of the house, were left speechless and astounded upon seeing Lu Cheng. The father's eyes were filled with amazement, as he wasn't sure if Lu Cheng was truly their son. The mother was somewhat bewildered, as she didn't grasp what was happening. Noticing their presence, Lu Cheng turned toward them and, with a warm grin, started to wave in greeting. Xia Penguin, stunned in disbelief, was also baffled. With a startled expression, he started to question whether this was really Lu Cheng. He could not accept that the youthful-looking high school student had now become an esteemed military figure. In the uniform, Lu Sheng bore a golden dragon medal, which was incredibly hard to acquire. Many generals spent their entire careers trying to earn this medal, but only a handful actually succeeded. Looking more attentively, Xia Pingnan spotted the insignia, known as "The Dragon Does Not Lie." With a composed expression, Lu Sheng began to stride down the red carpet toward his parents, and upon seeing this, Xia Penguin positioned himself beside the bodyguards, adopted a military stance, raised his hand to his forehead, and saluted Lu Sheng in a formal greeting. With a gaze full of astonishment, he introduced himself as the governor of Dongning Province and acknowledged General Kaiyan of the military district along with Commander Lu Sheng. At first, Lu Cheng continued walking as if nothing had occurred, But upon hearing Zhao Pingyan's voice, he turned toward him and, with a thankful smile, expressed gratitude for looking after his family. Since, in truth, he had been in the army for half a year. As the leaves drifted to the ground, Zhao Pingyan, still holding his salute, was left silent, his face showing bewilderment. With a puzzled look, he stated that there was no need for thanks, since, after all, this was his responsibility. Lu Cheng, with one hand resting in his pants pocket and a composed demeanor, extended the other hand toward him. With a calm gaze, he invited him inside to talk, since it was chilly outside. Zia Pingyan was somewhat taken aback and reached out to shake his hand, explaining that Lu Cheng had only just returned and must be exhausted from the journey. So he didn't want to intrude and would drop by another day. His sister, who still had her eyes closed, stepped forward and, with a cheerful expression, told him that it was time to go home. Lu Cheng listened to his sister, shut his eyes, and began strolling beside her. He chose not to insist any further and decided to invite old Zia for tea some other day. Zia Penguin turned his head toward him and, with an appreciative look, responded with an understanding nod. After some time, Lu Sheng entered his home, his family walking alongside him. Now that he had returned, his mother asked him to stay for dinner. The father stretched out his arm to the side, asking the mother to hold her words, since he wished to enjoy a fine drink with his son. King began bouncing with excitement, as she was eager to see the present that her brother had brought. General Cayenne, who stood beside the bodyguards, closed his eyes, and, with a kind smile, wished Lu Cheng a safe return. Zhang Penguin approached him, his expression filled with confusion. Observing him with a perplexed look, he thought that this man was quite unusual. Losing his composure, a bead of sweat rolled down his cheek. He grasped Cayenne by the attire, and with a composed expression, inquired about the commander's status. Upon seeing his face, Cayenne grew uneasy, started perspiring, and with a confused expression asked what exactly he was referring to. After a few moments, Cayenne suddenly understood why Zephyr had posed that question. His eyes widened in disbelief, and he couldn't help but be dumbfounded. He could not comprehend that Lu Xuan was the martial prodigy that Zhang Penguin had spoken about earlier. Zhang Penguin, raising his voice in shock, confirmed Cayenne's suspicion with a stunned look. Upon hearing this, Cayenne's eyes gleamed with surprise. He grasped his hand firmly, causing him to release his grip on his attire, and stood there in deep thought. Zhang Pingyan fell silent. Cayenne stepped forward, placed a hand on his shoulder, clenched his fist while smiling and says, "Don't forget me, brother." Inside the house, the father, who had one hand resting on his knee, extended the other towards him, and with a surprised look asked how he had become a great figure of the military army. Pink, who had both hands resting on the sofa, approached him, and with a smile she asked how he had become the general of the military district. Lu Cheng, who was sitting next to her, began to observe them with a serene look, started to smile, and remained silent at that moment. His mother, who was holding a tray with a glass, began to approach him. She handed him the glass using her hand, and her eyes filled with curiosity, as she remembered that even the old Zia Penguin had greeted Lu Sheng with respect. Lu Sheng took the glass, and with a cheerful look thanked his mother. He brought the glass to his mouth, closed his eyes, and began to drink, and explained that it was a long story. He decided to tell them about it later. Several seconds later, he opened his eyes, and with a serious look revealed to his parents that now he had a more important matter to discuss with them. While he had one hand resting on his knee, He moved the glass away from his mouth, started to look at them, and while he was blushing, revealed that he was in a relationship and had a girlfriend. This revelation left both Lu Cheng's parents and his sister in shock, who were left speechless. This was something they had not expected. They wanted to know how Lu Sheng had met his girlfriend. Lu Sheng had no choice but to tell the whole story, and half an hour later he emptied the glass of water and left it on the table, explaining that, more or less, this is how everything happened, with a look full of joy. He explained that this time he had returned to take them to the military district so that they could meet his girlfriend in person. The mother turned her head towards them, extended her hand, and thought that this was great next week. She had vacation so they could buy some things since they couldn't arrive. Empty-handed on the first visit, King put her hand on her cheek, started looking at the ceiling, and remembered that she also had vacation, so she could also go with them. The father put his hands on his hips, and upon seeing that the two of them could go with a smile, he decided to ask for permission at the supermarket in advance. While they were conversing among themselves, Lu Cheng remained listening silently without interrupting. He crossed his arms, closed his eyes, and revealed that they were going to go tomorrow. Upon hearing this, both the mother and the father were left speechless and confused at the same time, as according to them, it was too soon. Lu Cheng opened his eyes, started putting his hand inside his shirt, and with a sincere look explained that lately she had been quite busy and only had a few days off, and if they arrived late she would not have time to be with them. He took out his mobile, made a video call with Snowy, brought the mobile closer to his parents, and decided that it would be her who spoke with them. Snowy panicked, started to blush like a tomato, and explained that although this was a military area, they had shopping malls, supermarkets, restaurants, and even tourist spots. If they arrived tomorrow, they could spend the night, and she also asked them that they did not need to bring anything with them. Lucian propped the mobile on a stand and left it on the table. The mother sat down, began to wave at Snowy with her hand, and with a pleasant smile decided that they were going tomorrow. The father, who had his hands on his waist, could not help but smile upon seeing that Snowy was a very cute girl, thinking that his son's taste was as good as his own. King began to look at Snowy with curiosity. The mother stood up, grabbed the father by the ear, and with an angry look told him to stop saying nonsense. She decided to go prepare some things, since no matter how good the products from outside were, nothing was better than what was made at home. The father started to regret it, and with a sincere look asked her for forgiveness. The mother grabbed the father even more firmly by the ear and ordered him to start packing while they were talking. Lu Cheng opened the living room door, began to observe them, and could not help but smile and feel happy to be home again with his family without making a sound. He left the room and closed the door, leaning his back against it, and his eyes filled with seriousness. Since convincing the family to visit the military district under the pretext of meeting the future daughter-in-law was the simplest and most effective way, with a serene look, he remembered that it had been some time since Li-Dai's plan had failed. If there were no surprises, Lion Su's next move should be soon. He then took out a jar from his pocket, began to observe it, and came to the conclusion that for something as valuable as this tear of the saint, she would not give up so easily, since it was an object valued at 50 billion. Even for Lion Su, the wife of a martial master, it was something painful to lose. There was only one problem. Our boy didn't know what her next step was going to be. He started to touch his forehead with his finger and remembered that knowing this wasn't difficult by just checking the system. He could find out Lion Su's next step in the plan. He sat on the floor, closed his eyes, kept calm, took a deep breath, and began to concentrate. making a fluid energy and bubbles start to come out of his body. His eyes filled with surprise as he discovered that she was going to use the Black Magic Society. He began to imagine Lion Su smiling. It turned out that her next move was the Black Magic Society, the most mysterious organization of Huainan and Darkstar. While Lu Qing's body was emitting a powerful energy with a serious look, he remembered that few knew their secrets. But in the resources of the Fire Seed Depot, there was nothing that remained hidden. The Black Magic Society had members who seemed to be insane, and most had robotic implants. It was an international terrorist organization with sectarian inclinations, obsessed with genetic modifications, experiments with exotic beasts. They called themselves demons. Among them was a man with purple hair who was very powerful. They used the name Greater Demon to designate the most powerful. Among them, inspired by the 70. And 2 salmon demons. It was even said that there were 9th-level martial artists among their ranks. He began to imagine a man in a military suit sitting in a chair, holding a glass of wine and smoking a Marlboro. Behind the Society of Black Magic was the shadow of the Lion Kingdom, which partly explained why this organization had managed to exist for so long. While Lu Qiang's body was surrounded by a golden energy, he began to look down, as unfortunately the information did not accurately describe which demon of the Black Magic Society had attempted to assassinate him. But now for him this did not matter. He threw the jar into the air, making it start to spin, and his eyes filled with confidence. Since in the future Lion Su was already dead, which proved that this attack was destined for failure. And his body began to emit suffocating golden energy, and his eyes filled with excitement as the battle with the martial master of the extreme path was also near. At the same time, in the outskirts of Baihei City, a hooded man began to walk through a desolate area. This man had blonde hair, a tattoo on his eye, and wore an earpiece in his ear. With a calm look, he informed that he arrived at the location. He had heard that a great master from the top 10 had come for this. He asked his superior named Jay if he knew how important this target was. Jay asked the man not to be mistaken, as not only had one great master from the top 10 come upon hearing this, the man's eyes filled with surprise, and he could not help but remain in shock and start sweating, asking if their target was the son of the martial master of the Dragon Kingdom. Jay was a man who had stitches at the corners of his lips. He was who was on call with the other man. With an evil smile, he revealed that the target was even more valuable than the son of the martial master of the Dragon Kingdom. It was said that he was likely to become a martial master's Dawn Star. According to the army, he began to imagine Lu Cheng from behind, surrounded by intense flames. According to him, Lu Cheng had just turned 20 years old, and his combat ability was estimated at more than 30 stars, almost equal to the 10th Grand Master of their Black Magic Society. Upon hearing that Lu Cheng was 20 years old and already comparable to the 10th demon, the blond man clenched his teeth tightly, began to sweat, and his eyes filled with excitement and fear. He started to imagine Lu Cheng standing with a bunch of hands reaching out towards him. He did not know who wanted a talent like Lu Cheng, who was an invaluable treasure for any country or organization to die. Jay started to show an excited smile and explained to Juros that it could not be said that any country or organization was united. For some people, Lu Sheng was a treasure, but for others, he was a poison. Juros began to look sideways and with a confused look, stayed thinking in silence. In the room where Jay was, there was a poster with Lu Sheng's photo nailed to the wall. He threw a knife at the poster, which split the poster into several pieces. They had to eliminate Lu Shen before that poison became something deadly. After a few hours, Lu Cheng's family decided to go to the military district to meet Snowy, and everyone packed their bags. A black car arrived at the area, and his family left the house. The mother was carrying a backpack on her back and a small purse. The father had two backpacks, a small bag, and a suitcase. He turned to Lu Cheng, and with a pleasant smile, began to say goodbye to him with his hand. Meanwhile, on the other side, Little King was only carrying a backpack on her back. She closed her eyes, started moving towards the car, and with a happy smile, began to say goodbye to Lu Cheng with her hand, asking if he really didn't want to go with them. Lu Xiang left his house, closed his eyes, and with a smile, began to say goodbye to them and explained that the military department had assigned him to a mission, so he could not go with them. He asked his sister not to worry, since Snowy had prepared everything in the Eastern Military District, so they could go have fun for a couple of days. Promising that he would go after finishing the mission, Lu Cheng's family decided not to insist further, and they got into the black car, which started up and began releasing smoke along the way. The father stuck his head out of the window, put his hand near his mouth, and understood that the mission was important for their boy. He asked his son to give it his best shot, adding that he was very proud of him. Upon hearing these words, Lu Cheng, who was saying goodbye to them, began to smile and couldn't help but feel an inner peace. But once the car drove away, the smile he had on his face slowly began to disappear. He started to look down and became lost in his thoughts at that moment. His mobile phone began to ring several seconds later. He took out his mobile phone, answered the call, raised his head, and with a firm look, thanked the other person. The person who had called was none other than General Shi, who asked their boy not to worry, since the military district had sent a team of stars and fighter planes that would arrive at the military district in 2 hours. Upon hearing this, Lu Sheng thanked him again. Hizuo, who was on the call with Lu Sheng, began to look ahead with a serious expression and mentioned that at first he thought this was just a small matter. But once Lu Sheng mentioned that the Black Magic Society was involved in this, he immediately informed the local military districts, who were completely willing to cooperate with Lu Sheng's plan. Hizuo was sitting in his armchair, and while with one hand he was holding the mobile, he had the other resting on the arm of the armchair. He started to gaze at the floor with a lost look, and asked if he really didn't need him to send an expert to help him, revealing that the strength of the Black Magic Society was not something one should underestimate. He raised his head, and his eyes filled with seriousness as he remembered what had happened 3 years ago. The Black Magic Society had a member who had a tattoo on his face and piercings in his nose, eyebrow, and lip. The Southern Military District had faced off against the 9th pillar of the 72 demons of the Black Magic Society, called Demon Bayong. He began to remember what had happened. Many soldiers and high-ranking generals faced Bayong, and many lost their lives. As he was very powerful while his body was emitting a suffocating energy, he jumped, clenched his fists, and began to fly in the sky. 5 A-rank star teams had been sent to hunt this monster, including 3 of the best stars that were above 5 stars. Bayang was so powerful that he managed to injure 7 and kill 3, successfully escaping. At that time, the matter had caused a great uproar in the army. The loss of a potentially stellar general and 2 superior generals had been really painful for the military department for some time. Remembering that incident, Hizuo lost his composure, and his eyes filled with fear at the thought that Lu Cheng could also die this time. He began to scream, and assumed that the demons within the top 10 must have power equivalent to that of a general or higher, thinking it would be very problematic for their boy to face them alone. But far from accepting Hizuo's words, Lu Cheng felt disrespected and asked if he was joking upon hearing this. Hizuo couldn't help but be shocked, and his gaze filled with surprise. Lu Cheng, who was on the other side of the call, closed his eyes and with a confident smile, explained that the only problem was that the rats hidden in the sewers were annoying, since one never knew when they would come out to bite. Behind Lu Sheng was a burrow. In front of the burrow, several mice began to walk slowly, and upon sensing their presence, the eyes of the predator that was hidden in the burrow began to shine. At that moment, the predator that was hidden in the burrow, an orange cat, caught one of the mice and started to walk happily. Lu Cheng, who was walking in front, it was revealed that if the mice lost their edge, there was no reason for fear or concern. Lu Cheng retrieved the jar of poison, gripping it lightly between two fingers, stating that all that was needed was an irresistible bait, a trap to draw the rats from the sewers. With eyes burning with determination, Lu Cheng gazed ahead, clenched his fist with resolve, and asked General Hizuo for his opinion. Before him lay a serene park, lush with trees, while behind stood towering buildings. In one of the windows, unseen, was Giro silently tracking Lu Cheng's every move. Through binoculars, Lu Cheng's vision swept across the city until it landed on Giro, who, stunned, lowered the binoculars in shock the moment he felt Lu Cheng's piercing gaze. Geros stumbled backward, hitting the ground, his binoculars slipping from his grasp. His eyes widened in disbelief, unable to accept that Lu Cheng had spotted his exact location. Seconds passed as Geros steadied his breath, his trembling fingers reaching for the binoculars. Convincing himself it had to be chance after all, they were separated by 10 kilometers. It was impossible that he had been discovered. Yet fear and doubt clouded his eyes, rising to his feet. He grasped the binoculars with both hands, slowly lifting them once more to take another look at Lu Cheng. But that damn man had noticed again. Lu Cheng merely turned his head slightly, his expression unreadable, and continued speaking with General Hizuo. Seeing this, Geros exhaled in relief. Convincing himself it was mere coincidence, there was no way someone from the Dragon Kingdom could possess such skill in his mind. Only the top 10 of the 72 demons were capable of such feats. While Geros remained distracted, Lu Cheng brought his communicator close to his lips, his gaze sharpening, declaring that they had arrived. His unleashed spiritual power spanned a full 30 kilometers, eclipsing even satellite surveillance. Spotting a few rats in the crowd was a trivial task for him. He found it disappointing that this rat was merely level 6. He assumed Geros was a mere sentinel. Hearing this, General Hizuo shut his eyes, exhaled, and chose to trust Lu Cheng's plan, offering a word of caution to which Lu Cheng responded with gratitude once the call ended. General Hizuo set the device down on the table, leaning back into his chair, his fingers pressing against his temple, his gaze drifting downward in silent contemplation. His eyes shadowed with worry. Age had crept upon him. Once a fierce general, he no longer held the resolve and fire of his youth. But given the strength Lu Cheng had displayed during the great competition, it mattered little if a top 10 member of the Black Magic Society arrived at the base, lifting his head with a grim expression. He reasoned that if 2 of them came, it might prove more troublesome, but at worst, Lu Sheng could escape. There is no need to fear for him. His strength was exactly as the marshal had said. If he retreated, he was a commander. If he advanced, he was a saint. The ones who should be trembling in fear were those who had set their sights on Lu Cheng. As dusk settled, Geros remained fixated on Lu Cheng through his binoculars, paralyzed by the thought of being exposed. His teeth clenched tightly. He descended to the ground, ducked behind a street lamp and relayed a report to Jay. The target had entered the high-speed train station. It was suspected he would soon leave Bay City, most likely bound for Jindu Province. Sheng blended into the throng of people moving unhurriedly toward the station as Jaros kept him in his sights. Jay ordered him to continue tailing the target, to which Jaros responded with a firm acknowledgement. But in that instant, as Sheng took another step, Jaros's vision blurred. His head swam with dizziness before he could react. His body collapsed, face first onto the pavement, his eyes swimming with confusion. He couldn't comprehend what had happened until his gaze flicked to the side and he realized it wasn't his body that had fallen, but his head, severed clean from his shoulders. In an instant, a crimson pool spread beneath him, claiming his life. Sheng's body radiated a fierce orange glow. He pressed a hand against his earpiece, turned his head slightly, and fixed his gaze on Jaros's lifeless head, calmly reporting that at the 7 o'clock direction, exactly 1,000 meters away, a terrorist had been eliminated, requesting an immediate cleanup of the area. Upon hearing this, the district general coordinating with Sheng pressed a hand to his earpiece, unable to hide his bewilderment. He struggled to believe that Sheng had taken out the target so effortlessly. From a distance of 1,000 meters a few minutes later, several soldiers dressed in blue uniforms arrived at the scene only to be stunned by the sight before them. On the ground lay Jaros's lifeless corpse, and beside it, his severed head. The officer in contact with Sheng was left utterly speechless to him. This bordered on the supernatural. Had he not witnessed it himself, he wouldn't have believed it. Even under threat of death, he couldn't fathom how Sheng possessed such power at only 20 years of age, nor could he comprehend what was happening in this world, or where these monsters keep emerging from. Sheng, bored in a military carriage high-speed train, settled into an armchair, resting both hands on its arms, and with a calm expression, turned his gaze to the screen. After a full day and night of travel, the unit assigned to assist Sheng arrived in Jindu Province by their estimate. This distance and passage of time would be enough to drive the rats from their dens. At that moment, someone raised their hand to their forehead and delivered a crisp military salute. It was a woman with pink hair. She stepped toward Sheng, placed her hands behind her back and offered a sharp military salute. Being this close to our boy made her uneasy. She was Colonel Guo Ying from the Dongyi Province Military District. She greeted Sheng, stating that she had been assigned to assist him and was ready to follow any command. Hearing her voice, Sheng turned to face her, noting her nervousness with a steady gaze. He told her to relax upon those words. Guo Ying's eyes widened with shock and fear, a cold sweat forming on her eyebrows. On the table beside them rested a small briefcase. Sheng picked it up and explained that for this mission, he'd only need assistance with one minor task. Nothing overly complicated. Guo Ying stared at the briefcase, momentarily stunned with a hesitant look. She responded with a crisp understood. Sheng unlatched the case slowly, opened it, and in preparation for the rodents approaching from afar, he decided to properly arm himself. Sheng gripped the briefcase with both hands, and once it was fully open, it revealed a vial of spinal fluid. Level 8. He examined it silently for several moments. Then, removing the cap, he brought it to his lips, shut his eyes, and without hesitation began to drink. After consuming every last drop, Sheng wiped his mouth with his hand. At that moment, his body radiated an intense energy which surged outward, filling the room. His eyes began to glow, bracing for the impact. He activated the 7th immortal cell. Lu Cheng's power was so overwhelming that Guo Ying raised a hand to her mouth. Unable to contain her shock, she could hardly believe such strength. Meanwhile, elsewhere inside a hidden base, a man clutched his head in frustration. His anger boiling over with a furious roar, he hurled his headset to the ground, none other than Jay. His eyes locked onto the screen. In rage, his teeth clenched, sweat forming on his brow. Jeros's signal had gone dead, which meant he was likely already gone. Behind him sat a lavish armchair occupied by a sultry woman in a crimson dress. She crossed one leg over the other, arms folded, gazing downward, and in a steady voice, asked for an update on the target. At her words, Jay forced himself to calm down. Though his face still burned with fury, gritting his teeth, he reported that according to their latest intel, the target was en route to Jindu province, with an estimated arrival time of 50 hours. The woman ran a quick mental calculation and deduced that Lu Cheng would arrive in just over 2 days. A slow smile curled her lips, more than enough time. She lifted a hand to her face, her expression brimming with confidence, as she revealed that the fourth demon was already on the move. On the monitor, a photo of Lu Cheng appeared. Jay stormed to the table, slamming both fists down hard, his frustration mounting. Seeing the insects from the dragon realm daring to strike at nobles like them, his body ignited with a powerful golden energy, his lips curling into a sinister grin. With bloodlust in his eyes, he vowed to make those bastards pay dearly. Several hours later, the train had traveled far beyond the city. Today was a beautiful day. The sky was clear, and even a rainbow had appeared inside. One of the carriages sat Lu Xiang, his eyes heavy with exhaustion and sorrow. He stared at the ground, losing himself in thought. Behind him stood Guo Ying, her hands clasped behind her back, her nervous gaze locked onto Lu Cheng. She couldn't help but tremble. She couldn't believe she had been assigned to assist someone so strong and powerful as our boy. Feeling her unease, Lu Sheng turned his head back. His calm eyes studied her closely. He had no idea why she was so nervous. Lu Sheng shifted his thoughts, let out a sigh. His gaze softened, a faint smile forming. He explained that the journey would be long and gently told her to relax. Upon hearing this, Guo Ying's eyes flickered with confusion. Her nervous sweat thickened, and her anxiety grew even stronger. The truth was, she had been warned that Lu Cheng was an extremely fearsome man whose commands must be followed without question. She didn't fully understand the mission, but in her nervousness, she answered with a simple yes, and seeing this, our boy chose not to push any further. He took a glass of water, raised it to his lips, closed his eyes, and began to drink. Watching this, Guo Ying calmed slightly, her eyes observing him closely. Her mind wandering in silence. Several seconds passed, and as Lu Sheng drank his water, Guo Ying let out a quiet sigh of relief. She began to think the rumors had been exaggerated, for Lu Sheng carried himself with such ease. This realization allowed her to relax. Her expression turned cheerful. She glanced aside to take in the scenery through the train window. However, something strange began to unfold outside. The air shifted to an eerie orange hue upon witnessing this. Guo Ying's eyes widened in shock, and she couldn't help but stiffen out of nowhere. Just ahead of the speeding train, a sinister energy took shape, twisting into the face of a demon, its jagged teeth gleaming as it opened its mouth and unleashed a roar. Guo Ying and the other passengers on board could not help but feel an overwhelming fear, as no one could comprehend what was happening. Guo Ying braced herself, her body tense, her eyes filled with sheer panic. She turned to Lu Sheng and asked him to evacuate the train quickly, since there was an S-level threat in front of them. But once she turned back to the seat where Lu Sheng was sitting, she saw that he had disappeared. She was shocked, and with a confused look, began to wonder what was happening and where he had gone. The energy that had formed the face of the demon became giant, and it began to approach quickly towards the train. But at that moment, Lucian got out of the train, jumped, and prepared to fight and discover what was happening and who was responsible behind this. Lu Sheng clenched his fist tightly, used the ability called Star Punch, and his fist began to emit a powerful golden energy. He started to observe the demon with a determined look and with a smile, mocked the person who was behind this, asking if they hadn't arrived a little late, despite the fact that the energy was strong. Obviously, the demon was no match for someone as strong as Lucian. He moved at light speed and in an instant pierced through the figure of the demon, using his fist causing it to shatter into pieces, while the pieces of energy from the demon were falling to the ground. Lu Sheng's fist began to emit the same energy as the demon. He started to look down and couldn't help but smile. In a matter of seconds, the figure of the demon broke into small pieces, which slowly began to disappear into the air. Guo, eyeing approach the train window, rested her hands on it, and looking up at the sky, she saw Lu Sheng flying in the air. Her eyes filled with confusion, and she couldn't help but be left speechless. She didn't know what was happening and thought someone was filming a movie in the area. Lucian, who was flying in the air, turned his head back, and upon seeing her, he couldn't help but smile. With a confident look, he asked her to wait on the train for a moment since he was going to do something important, and wouldn't take long to return. Upon seeing Lucian, Guo couldn't help but panic and start sweating. She was left speechless as she remembered that they were on a high-speed train, which was in motion. Her eyes filled with surprise upon seeing that Lu Sheng could fly and keep up with the speed of the train. Next to the train tracks, there were some electricity poles. On one of the poles stood a mysterious person. Lu Sheng began to scan the area, and upon sensing a mysterious aura, he looked to one side and saw the mysterious person with a confident look. He concluded that this person was who had created the figure of the demon. The mysterious person quickly realized that he had been discovered. He was a man with orange hair. While his body was emitting a suffocating energy, he placed his hand over his chest, bowed his head before Lu Sheng as a form of respect, and apologized upon seeing that our boy could walk on air. He realized that he was a psychic master. According to him, our boy was someone very interesting. Lu Sheng remained calm, began to observe the man, and with a tranquil expression asked if he had come alone. The man raised his head, started to stare intently at Lu Sheng. With a penetrating gaze began to bite his tongue, and with a smile asked if Lu Sheng thought that attack had been the best attack of all, revealing that he only wanted to kill him in a simple and straightforward way. He did not expect this mission to have an unexpected surprise. He brought his hand close to his face and his whole body began to tremble. An evil smile spread across his face and his eyes filled with excitement. Starboy reminded him of those he had met the last time he came to the land of the dragon. They wore uniforms just like Lu Sheng, and were also beautiful, young, and brave. Remembering this, the man could not help but lose his composure. He put his hands over his face and could not help but smile like a madman and start to blush. His eyes were filled with emotion as he remembered that they had been tender and fragile, like fresh grass stems for him. Tearing them apart had been intoxicating. He started to sweat, stuck out his tongue, began to observe Lu Sheng, and introduced himself as the 9th pillar of the black magic sect called Bayman. Upon hearing this, Lu Sheng began to check his watch and realized that 1 minute and 20 seconds had passed. He clenched his fist, began to observe Bayman, and with a smile, mocked him, saying that he talked too much. Upon hearing this, Bayman could not help but become enraged. He clenched his teeth tightly and with a furious look asked Blue Xiang what he had just said. Blue Xiang extended his hand towards him and slowly began to approach him. Bayman's body started to emit a powerful blue energy. He grabbed his shirt with one hand, put the other inside. It began to look at Lu Sheng with an excited gaze, and with a smile mentioned that he was not going to let him have the chance to say his last words. A smile appeared on Bayman's face, and just before he could attack or make a move, something sharp cut his head in half. This had been none other than Lu Sheng. In the blink of an eye, he appeared behind Bayman and, using only his hand, sliced the unfortunate Bayman clean in two, leaving him no time to even respond. Bayman's torso was severed apart and started collapsing onto the earth. Lu Xiang took a moment to inspect him and discovered he held 7 immortal cells as well as 4 powerful sword skills alongside numerous martial wills. In just a blink, Bayman's life was gone. Lu Cheng gazed at the lifeless form. His expression filled with contempt as he raised his hand close to his face. Lu Cheng possessed incredible strength, and to him clashing with someone like Bayman was a disgrace he'd rather perish than stoop so low. Lu Sheng pressed a finger to his forehead. His face clouded with doubt as he pondered which rank Bayman had claimed to hold among the feared 72 demons. He shut his eyes, focusing deeply, choosing to let the thought pass. He channeled his energy to directly detect if any of Bayman's allies were lurking nearby. He wanted to seize this moment to eliminate them all in one strike. A few moments later, Lu Qing's eyes snapped open. He unleashed his scouting technique. His aura surged outward in waves, reaching as far as the closest city. Using this technique, Lu Qing sensed the presence of 4 figures concealed within various structures. But given the distance, it posed a slight hassle for him. Maintaining a calm demeanor, Lu Sheng concluded it was best to let them be to his thinking. It was wiser to wait for them to act first, and speaking of that now, he found himself drifting further and further from what ordinary people and common warriors considered normal. As the high-speed train pressed forward toward its intended stop, Lu Sheng descended, about to turn this high-tier battle into something straight out of fiction. Moments later, Lu Sheng re-entered the train until he arrived at the carriage where Guo Ying sat. She was trembling, and in tears, her hands clutched tightly to her chest, and she couldn't help but feel a wave of relief upon seeing Lu Sheng return safely. Before her eyes, he looked at her silently. Lu Sheng took his seat once more, settled in, and with one hand draped over the seat's armrest, leaned his head against the other, shut his eyes, and allowed a faint smile. From Bay City to Kyoto province spanned over 8,000 kilometers. In all, he was convinced that Lion Su would make an attempt on his life before the trip was over, as Lu Sheng rested his head against his palm deep in thought. Guo Ying, standing right behind him, covered her mouth with her hand. Her entire body trembling. As a result, this train was traveling at 200 kilometers per hour. She couldn't comprehend how Lu Sheng managed to keep pace with its speed. She swallowed hard, anxiety swelling within her. In her eyes, Lu Sheng was unbelievably powerful because he moved as if limits didn't apply to him. Lu Sheng subtly turned his head and with a composed expression called her attention. His voice startled her from her daze, and she couldn't help but feel a sudden shiver run through her spine. She hesitated before asking the commander what he wanted. Lu Sheng stood and walked over, placed his hand gently on her shoulder and with a smirk, asked her to wait here, as he had something to take care of and would return shortly. He also told her to send their coordinates to the military and instruct them to be ready. Guo Ying stood frozen for several seconds, then finally responded with a soft, "Yes." Minutes later, she transmitted the coordinates to the army, then walked back to the carriage where Lu Cheng was pointing at herself with uncertainty, asking what her next move should be. Hearing her question, Lu Cheng snapped out of his thoughts, fixed her with a composed gaze and reassured her there was nothing left to do. It was done, advising her to rest for now, promising to inform her if the situation changed after those words. Lu Sheng turned his back to her and began to walk away, her eyes full of confusion. She was left speechless, unable to believe it had truly ended. She envisioned herself as a young girl, and Lu Xiang patting her head and offering her a small orange. His tone felt as casual as her father's when he told her to wait at the station while he went to buy some oranges. Meanwhile, in a shadowy location, a screen flickered with an alert displaying Bayman's image. This was Jay's hideout. Upon seeing it, his breath hitched in panic. His eyes filled with dread. He couldn't process that Bayman's vital signals had vanished completely. The woman in the revealing dress was taken aback. She rose to her feet and stepped closer, her face filled with disbelief, asking how such a thing was possible. Jay sat frozen, lost in thought, his eyes reflecting sheer terror and confusion. He refused to accept that Bayman was gone. The woman spun on her heel, darted away with a determined expression, making the decision to inform their master while commanding Jay to keep monitoring. Jay turned back and answered, "Yes." The woman took out her phone, made a call, and even though she had no idea how to explain this to the master with a serious look, she revealed that Bayman was dead. The path was uncertain. They had to be cautious because this time the mission wasn't as simple as they thought her master was. A blonde woman, she brought a hand to her lips, and with a grin said, she wasn't as foolish as Bayman. She stated that though the Dragon Nation was weak, he had caused a stir last time he had been the focus for too long, and now he dared to walk so boldly, so it was only natural he was dead. She couldn't help but laugh and a blue energy surged from her body. She vowed that before the break of dawn, she would return with the target's head. After that, the woman ended the call. The woman in the red dress stared at her phone and chose to put her faith in her. Before her was a table with a wanted poster. Lu Sheng's face staring back at her. Just looking at his picture sent an unexplainable chill down her spine. She recalled he was just a 20-year-old martial arts prodigy, so she couldn't understand why she felt this way. She imagined Lu Sheng extending his hand toward her. They were supposed to be the hunters, but it felt as if they were the ones being stalked by death. At that moment, at the heart of the Eastern Province Command stood a high-ranking officer named Chewy, watching a monitor. His eyes filled with shock and disbelief, unable to comprehend what he had just witnessed. He was inside a room packed with computers, surrounded by soldiers tasked with surveillance and controlling the operations. One soldier, his arm tucked behind his back, lifted his hand towards the ceiling and announced a triple S-level threat, issuing commands to the elite squad, Wolf Teeth and Sharp Blade, to proceed immediately to the given coordinates as his voice echoed. All soldiers turned their attention to him. One man, bearing a scar over his eye, named Qin, swiveled around with a puzzled expression, questioning his comrade about the uproar and whether they understood the mission. Details the soldier from earlier then ordered units 5, 6, and 8 of the heavy infantry to prepare for combat. At any moment, one soldier spoke up, recalling that the triple S-level threat was linked to a terrorist faction hailing from the land of the lion called the Society of Black Magic. Upon hearing this, Qin's face darkened. He turned to his friend with a grave expression, explaining that now that the Society of Black Magic was involved, this mission had become extremely perilous. Chewie started observing his friend with confusion and questioned what he meant. Qin shut his eyes and disclosed that 3 years ago, a terrorist assault had taken place by the Society of Black Magic within the Southern Military District, and during that time, he was part of the anti-terrorist division. Then he asked his comrade if he knew how many soldiers had been dispatched upon hearing this. Chewie's eyes widened in shock. He had no idea that his friend had been part of the anti-terrorist force. He admitted that he didn't know. Qin opened his eyes, his expression laced with fear as sweat began to form on his brow. He recalled the formidable warriors who had been part of the mission, revealing that over 500 operatives had been mobilized, including more than 20 Level 7 Masters, and among them 5 elite Level 8 Grandmasters, yet even with such overwhelming force, the target had escaped. That day was the most humiliating moment for the Eastern Military Department. Chewie stepped closer to his friend, studied him intently, and with a composed expression thought to himself that this was truly terrifying. He couldn't fathom how, despite such an operation, the target had managed to get away, asking if it was really true that the Society of Black Magic was that powerful. Qin gazed forward with a solemn stare, stating that they were absolute monsters. Before him stood a table laid out with military suits. He ran his fingers over his tie, his eyes locking onto the suits, then told his comrade to gear up as it was time to deploy. Chewie's expression filled with shock. His eyes scanned the suits, unable to shake his disbelief. They suited up, and after several hours the two men reached the Eastern Military District, proceeding to the designated coordinates. But as they arrived at the location, Chewie stood frozen in astonishment at what lay ahead. Meanwhile, on the other side, Qin examined the scene with a composed expression. His mind sinking into deep thought. Before them lay Bayman's corpse, severed cleanly in half. Both men stood there, equally shocked and bewildered, unable to grasp that the target was already dead. Qin crouched down, resting one hand on his knee while stretching the other toward the body. His face set in a grave expression, stating that, even in death, Bayman's aura remained overwhelming, and judging by the blood, he must have been a Level 8 Grandmaster. Chewie, utterly speechless and stunned, gazed at the corpse in silence, his expression filled with sheer disbelief, and judging by Bayman's appearance, he thought this guy didn't seem to be from the land of the dragon. Ken approached the corpse, and with a serious expression explained that he had not been mistaken and that this guy really belonged to the Society of Black Magic. Bayman's body had been cut in half perfectly, and his eyes were filled with surprise. Around the body, a pool of blood formed. Ken mentioned that although the members of the Society of Black Magic were not ordinary people, this great master showed not a trace of pain or fear on his face, which meant that before dying, he hadn't even realized the attack being cut in half in an instant. King began to bring his hand closer to the corpse, mentioning that he could not imagine that visual sensation. At that moment, Chewie's attention was fixed on the corpse, and his eyes filled with surprise as he realized something. He was terrified, and with a surprised look, he asked Ken to wait a moment and ordered him to look at what Bayman had on his back. Ken complied, approached the corpse and placed his hand on Bayman's back, and with a calm expression began to turn the corpse over upon seeing the tattoo that Bayman had on his back. Ken's eyes filled with fear. He recognized this tattoo. He was the leader of the Black Magic Society that they had not managed to capture in the Southern Military Zone. 3 years ago, Chewie started walking towards him, and with an expression full of confusion, asked if he was saying that someone had defeated Bayman in one blow, whom neither 20 masters nor 5 grandmasters had been able to stop. At that time, he did not know then why that person had asked them to come here after having killed the target. Ken began to look at the corpse with a serene expression and started to think he began to touch his head with his hand, and came to the conclusion that Lu Shen wanted them to clean the area at the same time in the Eastern Military District Command. There was the marshal behind him were 2 high-ranking soldiers. He sat in the armchair, crossed his legs, took out a tablet, and couldn't help but start smiling upon seeing that Lu Cheng had killed Bayman with a single blow. According to him, if Lu Cheng wanted to kill him too, he would probably do it with a single blow as well. He raised his head, closed his eyes, and let out a sigh of relief. Since finally, the army was going to have a true supreme master of martial arts. At the same time, Lu Xiang arrived at the entrance of a tunnel while his body was emitting a powerful golden energy. He began to observe the area in silence. In that moment, a powerful red energy appeared, and upon seeing this, Lu Xiang's eyes filled with surprise as this projection of will seemed much more powerful than he expected. He extended his hand and invoked a powerful flame of golden and red fire. He began to observe his hand, and could not help but be astonished and somewhat surprised. It turned out that he had been wrong. Last time using this to simulate another person's combat, will was completely useless. According to him, it was better to simulate his own will. Lu Cheng closed his eyes and concentrated, making the flames become more intense. Using spiritual power, one could build a manifestation of their own will outside the body. In an instant, Lu Sheng's manifestation of will left his body, and although the real body could not move, this manifestation could travel thousands of kilometers, and with a single thought it could return instantly at that moment. A perfect clone made of manifestation of will appeared behind Lu Cheng. It was emanating the same aura as our boy. This was not a simple technique. It was clearly a divine ability of the martial path. Lu Cheng began to control the clone, clenched his fists, grabbed his wrist with the other hand, and with a penetrating gaze realized that with this one could do many things that the physical body could not perform, like flying, passing through the ground, going through walls, or even entering the women's bathroom. It must be said that our boy has some rather special thoughts. He began to imagine Lion Su on her knees. He placed his hand on top of her head, making her eyes fill with fear. Now he could use this clone to eliminate people like her. Lu Xiang started to smile and couldn't help but feel happy. Since no one would know he was responsible, even if he were discovered, it wouldn't matter much. Lion Su had crossed certain boundaries, and even the wife of the martial saint would not be able to bear the consequences of her actions. He began to imagine Lion Su lying on the ground and crying in front of her. Was the martial saint turning his back on her? Once the martial saint considered that the cost of becoming enemies with Liu Sheng and the forces backing him was greater than the value that Lion Su brought him. Then, Lion Su's title of wife of the martial saint could also lose its importance. Lu Sheng began to control his manifestation clone and entered into the tunnel. He had checked several times the connections in their life trajectories between Lian Su and himself, and her death would not cause much commotion. It seems that this woman, after bringing out the lament of the saint in collaborating with Society for Black Magic, had paid a price that surely left the martial saint very displeased. Lu Sheng's eyes filled with joy, and with a smile he thought this was a viable option. Lu Chen entered into the tunnel and activated blood power. His energy began to expand throughout the tunnel, causing the other end to start shining. Lu Chen could not help but feel excited as they had already arrived at the other end of the tunnel. Two people arrived. Our boy did not know how strong this projection of will was going to be, but these two members of the Black Magic Society had arrived just in time. Lu Chen used his power again, and a tornado made of fire appeared and pierced through the ceiling of the tunnel, creating a large hole. At the same time, one of the members of the Black Magic Society
started looking at his watch and realized that it was almost time. The man crossed his arms and began to look at the woman and explained that the high-speed train on which their target was traveling was going to pass by here at any moment. The woman also crossed her arms and with a serene look decided that it was better to act here and finish as soon as possible. While the man who had his arms crossed was distracted thinking, a golden energy approached them and passed by their side. Upon feeling this energy, the man's eyes filled with fear and alertness. He did not know what was happening. The man bent down and began to use his power, causing a blue energy to start covering his body. Upon seeing this, the woman also began to use her power, making her eyes start to shine. They knew that with such an intense threat, it was better to prepare for combat. The woman transformed into a dragon demon, and the man into a powerful werewolf. In the sky was the projection of martial will of Lu Sheng. He crossed his arms and started observing them. The man began to look at the sky and upon seeing this, with a confused look asked his companion Teng Fei if he was a god. Teng Fei got angry, clenched her teeth tightly and with a look full of rage asked him to stop saying nonsense. She thought that he could be a manifestation of the martial saint. The man was somewhat surprised, began to observe Lu Sheng, and explained that he was not a manifestation of the martial saint, since the manifestations of the martial saint were not so weak. Moreover, as he remembered, none of the three martial saints of Longguo had the appearance of a young man like him. Lu Sheng, who had his arms crossed, began to observe them and remained silent. He started to extend his hand towards the sky and with a smile asked them who they were. He extended his hand towards them, causing a giant hand made of golden energy to start advancing towards them, asking how they dared to cause a commotion here. Feeling this strong pressure, both Teng Fei and the man fell to their knees on the ground and began to prostrate themselves before him. As the man's body was trembling, he raised his head and with an angry look asked who he was and what kind of technique this was. Lu Sheng extended his hand towards them and with a suffocating look called them insolent. He could not believe that he had dared to call him by his name, revealing that he was the god of the night. He used his power again and ordered the man to kneel before him. Lu Sheng's energy made the man kneel before him, hitting his head hard against the ground. Lu Sheng sighed and with a lost look thought that these disgusting rats would not even understand even if he explained it to them. With a gaze full of hatred, he ordered them to hurry up and die. He prepared to launch a powerful attack to end their lives, and upon feeling this, the man lifted his head from the ground and became alert. With a determined look, he decided that if they did not dodge the attack, they were going to die. Lu Sheng launched a powerful attack towards the ground, creating a great explosion. But just at that moment, Teng Fei and the man gained momentum and retreated from the area, dodging the attack. Lu Sheng extended his hands to the sides and a powerful golden ring appeared behind his back. While our boy's eyes were shining, he called them disposable rats again, and for daring to challenge him, he decided to go right now to summon an immortal to annihilate them on the spot. The man began to get angry and with a confused expression asked if this was some kind of joke. Meanwhile, on the other side, Teng Fei became somewhat nervous. She started looking at Lu Sheng and explained that the term God of Night was familiar to her. She had heard that he was a divine figure from Longguo's popular legends. Upon hearing this, the man turned his head towards her and with a surprised look asked what she was talking about. Lu Sheng crossed his arms and began to observe them in silence. The man raised his head, started to look at Lu Sheng and realized that they had encountered a popular deity of Longguo. Lu Sheng began to use his power, causing his body to start emitting a powerful golden energy. Upon feeling this energy, the attention of Teng Fei and the man was fixed on him. Teng Fei clenched her teeth tightly, started to look at Lu Sheng, and her eyes filled with panic as she knew he was preparing to attack. The man clenched his fists, turned his head towards her, and with a serious look explained that there were not so many deities in Longguo, so he assured that he was false. If both gave their best, they could have a chance to win. Teng Fei started to sweat like crazy. She began to observe Lu Sheng and thought that Wally was right since they were the 10 strongest demons. If they joined forces, it was not possible for them to lose against opponents from Longguo who were not even martial saints. Both began to use all their power, causing their eyes to start shining and powerful bursts of fire appeared around their bodies. They decided it was time to attack. Lu Sheng, who was flying in the sky, began to watch them silently. Tan Fei began to stare at him, opened her mouth, started to fill her lungs, and while charging the attack, called Lu Sheng a fraud who used tricks and deceit and ordered him to die. She used her power called Abyss Flames and launched a powerful flame towards Lu Sheng. And as if this were not enough, the werewolf jumped into the flame. As his body was engulfed in flames, he lunged at Lu Sheng, began to extend his claw, and with an angry look used the technique called Blazing Flame Strike. At first Lu Sheng remained silent watching the man, but then closed his eyes, opened his mouth and inhaled air to fill his lungs, and mocked the man, calling him barbaric, and explained that his movements were very weak. Just before the werewolf could attack, Lu Sheng blew a powerful gust of fire from his mouth, which hit the man's body directly, causing him to fly backward. Lu Sheng's power made Tan Fei's flames slowly begin to disappear. Upon seeing this, the man's eyes filled with confusion. He did not know how this was possible. Tan Fei's fire could even burn demons, but Lu Sheng had managed to disperse it with just a breath. Not long after, a purple energy appeared around the man's body, leaving him immobilized. The man's eyes filled with alertness and fear. He quickly realized that this was psychic power, and that Lu Sheng was a psychic master. Our boy kept calm, extended his hand towards him, making a powerful and suffocating purple energy appear in the palm of his hand, explaining that this was divine power. Lu Sheng launched the attack at the werewolf, causing it to hit directly against his body. His bones began to break, making him open his mouth and start screaming in pain. Lu Sheng began to use his power, causing all the bones of the man to start breaking. Tan Fei turned her back on them, clenched her teeth tightly, and her eyes filled with confusion and rage. She couldn't believe that this was really happening. She decided that it was better to escape than fight against a demon like Lu Sheng. Just before she could move, Lu Sheng moved at the speed of light, appeared beside her, and with a calm expression revealed that he was not a demon. Upon sensing his presence, Tan Fei looked to the side, and upon seeing Lu Sheng, she couldn't help but be stunned and start to feel fear, as she knew this was nothing good. Lu Sheng stood in front of her and with a penetrating gaze decided that these barbarians deserved to taste the punishment of dismemberment. At the same time, the high-speed train began to traverse the land like a bullet. Guo Aiying reached Lu Sheng's carriage, and with a surprised expression started looking around, wondering where he had gone and why he still hadn't returned. According to her, this mission couldn't end like this. At that moment, Lu Sheng, who was holding a roll of rope, appeared. He started to look at her with a pleasant gaze and with a smile asked her if something had happened. Upon seeing Lu Sheng, she became somewhat confused as she did not know when he had returned. Lu Sheng rolled the rope into a ball, brought it close to his face, began to observe it, and with a smile explained that he had just come back from finishing a small sewing job. Upon hearing this, Guo Aiying's mind filled with many questions. She began to look at Lu Sheng with a confused expression and asked what he was talking about. Lu Sheng looked away, started to gaze outside through the train window, and with a cheerful smile replied that she was going to find out what he was talking about very soon. Not far from the area, where the two train tracks were very close to each other, there was a post in the middle to which two people were tied. These people were the werewolf and Tan Fei. Now their whole bodies were tied against the post. Several minutes later, both regained consciousness and began to struggle to break the rope but were unable. They did not know what was happening or why they could not free themselves, questioning if this rope was made of gold. Tan Fei and the man looked ahead and their eyes filled with fear upon seeing what was approaching. Two high-speed trains going in opposite directions appeared and far from running over them, passed by the side. But once they reached just where they were, something happened. Someone extended their hand, and while it was surrounded by a purple energy, they thought it was almost time. This person was none other than Lu Sheng, who was sitting in the train seat. He crossed his legs, and while resting his head on his arm, began to extend his hand towards them, and with a calm look decided that it was time to start the show. Lu Sheng activated his spiritual power, and the rope that was around Tan Fei's body transformed into energy and one end shot towards the train. Upon seeing this, she was left speechless and her eyes filled with fear. She couldn't believe that the rope had moved on its own. The rope moved towards the train until it wrapped around the front part. The train began to move at high speed, creating tension in the rope. Tan Fei opened her mouth and started to drool, her eyes filled with panic as she realized what was about to happen. The tension that the trains created in the rope massacred Tan Fei and the werewolf, causing both to lose their lives in an instant. It had already fallen night and the moon was high in the starry sky. The tension that the trains had created was so strong that their bodies were cut into small pieces. Lu Sheng intertwined his hands, began to look to one side, and with a lost gaze thought that this could also be considered a modern version of execution by parts. In reality, he had done this so that it would be a serious warning for the Lion Country, making it clear that whoever dared to offend Lu Sheng would be punished. While he was distracted, Guo Aing, who had one hand behind her back, appeared, saluted, and with a serious look informed that she had just heard a strange sound, and for security reasons asked if he wanted her to call a helicopter to go directly to Kyoto province. Upon hearing her voice, Lu Sheng came out of his trance, began to observe her and remained thinking in silence. Several seconds later, he closed his eyes and with a smile replied that no. He peeked his head a little over the side of the seat, began to point at her with his finger, and with a serene expression revealed that right in the place where the two trains had crossed, two people had died, asking her to remember to send someone to clean the area. Upon hearing this, Guo Aing was somewhat confused but responded with an understood. At the same time, at the headquarters of the Black Magic Society, Jay fell on his butt against the ground, and his eyes filled with surprise. He did not know what was happening. In front of him was a screen with the photographs of Tan Fei and the werewolf. A warning symbol appeared indicating that they had died. Jay, who was lying on the ground, was terrified to see that the life signs of demons number 6 and 7 had disappeared. Behind him stood the woman in the red dress. She panicked, began to observe the screen, and remembered that the 10 great lords of the demon pillars were almost divine beings. Each could control a body of an extraordinarily powerful beast. All the impressive achievements that Society of Black Magic had accomplished had been thanks to them. Jay started to sweat and couldn't help but begin to feel fear. His eyes filled with terror as he recalled that barely one day had passed and 3 great demons had already fallen, wondering if Longguo had mobilized a powerful warrior of saint level. The woman began to sweat, and with a lost look she refuted this theory since the 3 great martial saints had no deep relationship with the target. And the army also did not have martial saint level experts in its ranks, so there was only one possibility left. They had misjudged the strength of the target. He did not have the level of a general but that of a marshal. Upon hearing this, Jay's expression changed. He could not believe that Lu Sheng had the level of a martial saint at just 20 years old. This was something that broke the rules. He was a prodigy in martial arts. Jay's eyes filled with despair. He did not know what to do now since they had already lost 3 of the first 10 demonic pillars. Even if this mission generated benefits, it would not be able to compensate for the losses. He thought it would be better to stop the plan. The woman began to point at the screen with her finger. She started observing Jay and explained that it was better to accept losses than to cancel the mission, since if they did not finish off Lu Sheng, nobody guaranteed that after becoming stronger he would not come hunting them down in society from black magic. Jay, who was sweating like a madman, turned his head towards her and with a confused expression asked if it was better to contact the organization immediately for support. The woman clenched her fist tightly and her body began to emit a golden energy. With a look full of hope she replied that no, since they still had demon number 4, Samakina. With her strength, they were going to be able to kill the target. Jay put his hand on top of his head, started shaking his head and felt frustrated since the organization had not given them Samakina's contact. At that moment, the woman intertwined her hands, closed her eyes, fell to her knees on the ground and revealed that it was not necessary since Samakina had always been with them. Upon hearing this, Jay turned his head towards her and with a confused look began to wonder what she was talking about. The woman opened her mouth and started screaming, invoking the 4th pillar of the demon called Samakina. Not long after, she lost consciousness. At that moment, a hand came out of the woman's mouth, and upon seeing this, Jay was terrified and speechless. He did not know what was happening. A head full of drool began to come out of the woman's mouth. Several seconds later, Samakina, a blonde woman, came out of the woman's mouth, causing her head to explode. She landed in front of the screen and approached Jay. He fell to his knees on the ground and couldn't help but start to feel fear. She had a tattoo on her leg. She asked Jay for the coordinates of the target. Jay, who was scared shitless, remained silent. While Samakina's body was surrounded by a golden aura, she gave Jay the order to send her the coordinates of the target.
After ending the life of the 2 members of the Black Magic Society, Lu Sheng began to clean the blood off his body with a handkerchief and realized that the man in front of him was named Barbados. Barbados's lifeless body lay on the ground, covered in blood. Lu Sheng, who was cleaning the blood from his hand with the handkerchief, started to observe him. It turned out that the Black Magic Society had sent many of them, but they were not very important since they were just small fish who had no chance against the king of the sea. While inspecting Barbados's corpse, Lu Shen found an earpiece. He picked it up with his hand, and after looking closely, he realized that the Black Magic Society used it to communicate among themselves, so it must have a location function. Far from thinking about destroying it, he decided to take it with him so that people from the Black Magic Society could easily find him. The moon emerged over the horizon of the snowy mountains, and due to Lu Shen's energy, it turned red. Lu Shen gripped the receiver tightly, activated it, turned his head towards the moon, and asked those who were not afraid of death to come quickly for him, as after the sun rose, he would no longer feel like playing with them. With his current speed, he was going to be able to reach Kyoto in about 5 hours, and if he used all his power, he would arrive in just 2 hours, being faster than a plane. Lu Shen began to observe the precious moon and sank into his thoughts. This trip was to kill Lion-C, so to avoid any unexpected situations, he had to ensure that he was in top form. Lu Shen turned his back on Barbados' corpse and began to walk away from the area. He had to wait for the demons of the Black Magic Society to arrive. If he went too fast, they would not be able to keep up with him. He knew that although killing Lion-C would not have serious consequences because she was the woman of the martial saint of the extreme path, he had to show a little respect for her publicly. He could not make her death too obvious, nor could he leave any evidence that led to him being guilty. He started gazing sideways and with a thoughtful expression decided to look for a solid alibi. He took his mobile phone out of his pocket and began browsing at the time of Lion-Su's death. He had to be somewhere else, causing a great uproar. The bigger it was, the better. He dialed someone's phone number, put the mobile phone to his ear, and with a pleasant smile, greeted the other person. The person he had called was Healing Su. She was in her laboratory, and while with one hand she was holding a test tube, she answered the call. Upon hearing Lu Sheng's voice, her eyes filled with surprise. She greeted the martial Saint Lucien back, and he asked when Elder Chen's birthday was. Upon hearing this, her gaze fixed on the mobile phone with a confused expression. She replied that the birthday was tomorrow night, asking if there was any problem. Lucien's gaze filled with joy. He began to look at the ground and, with a smile, made up an excuse, saying that he worried someone would want to bother her. Since at these kinds of family birthday banquets, those second and third generation descendants who thought they were superior always appeared and tried to belittle her, he started to imagine the sexy Ling Su surrounded by handsome men. He mentioned that this was how she was always described in novels, adding that now she had the perfect profile of a female novel protagonist. Ling Su, who was on the other side of the call, began to touch her head with her hand, closed her eyes, and replied that there was no need for him to worry, since in the Chen family she was practically invisible, so she didn't believe what Lu Cheng said would happen. Lu Cheng simply ignored what she had just said. He moved the phone away from his ear, started looking to one side, and with a smile, asked her to send him the address since tomorrow night he would arrive on time to support her at the event. After this, he hung up the call. Ling Su moved the phone away from her ear, began to navigate through it, and with an uncertain look, began to wonder what this guy was planning to do now. A smile spread across Lu Xiang's face, and his gaze filled with confidence, as this was a perfect plan. Once he killed Lion Su, he would quickly arrive at the Chen family's birthday and stir up some commotion. He needed Lin Su to do this for him. It didn't matter to him since, if he set up a good scene, she would gain status. Even though she didn't want to pretend, she would have to do it one way or another. While Lu Chang was walking through the area, wearing the headset of the Black Magic Society.
On top of the mountain outside at midnight, the wind begins to blow. Somewhere in the mountain, there were two people camping.
They were sitting on a blanket and wore jackets due to the intense cold. Both started observing the sky, and the woman asked if he was lying since there wasn't a single star in the sky that night, questioning whether there really would be a meteor shower. The man started to touch his nose with his finger, turned towards her, and with a confident look replied that he was telling the truth. He had checked the forecast, and they said that tonight there was going to be a meteor shower, one that only happens once every 1,000 years. The woman who was looking at the sky began to rub her hands, sighed, and fell silent seeing this. The man extended his hands towards her and, with a kind smile, suggested the idea of entering the camping tent to warm up a bit since it was very cold outside. In reality, he had lied because otherwise he would not have managed to get them to spend the night together alone. The woman intertwined her hands and, with an insecure look, began to rise and decided to trust him upon seeing this. The man began to extend his hands towards her and could not help but start smiling. At that moment, the woman began to point towards the sky, clenched her fist, and with an excited look, thought that he had not lied since there were really meteors in the sky, and they were also golden. Upon hearing this, the man began to look up at the sky, and his eyes filled with surprise, leaving him speechless. With a confused look, he began to question whether there were really meteors just above them. Something bright and surrounded by a golden energy passed by. Upon seeing how enormous it was and the brightness it had, the man was shocked. At that moment, right in front of the golden meteor, a red, evil energy appeared and began to advance towards it. The meteor impacted against the energy, creating a great explosion in the sky, which began to emit a powerful golden energy, being visible from very far away. The man quickly took out his telescope, started to adjust it, and put his hand in front of his forehead due to the intense brightness. His gaze was filled with confusion and surprise. He did not know how it was possible for meteors to collide with each other in this way. According to him, this made no sense. He approached the telescope, and upon observing with a little attention, realized that it was not a meteor but a person. Due to the impact, the golden energy changed direction and struck hard against the ground, destroying it into pieces. Several seconds later, someone wearing a white shirt began to brush the dust off his shoulder with his hand. He did not expect that one day someone would fall from the sky with such a powerful technique. This person was none other than Liu Chen, someone surrounded by a tornado of red energy, who began to descend from the sky. He started to observe the tornado, and it didn't take long for him to realize that this person was the expert from the Black Magic Society. Once the energy tornado disappeared, Salman Kina's figure became visible. She began to stare at Liu Cheng with a murderous look. She used her power, making several clones appear. The clones gained momentum and started advancing towards him, preparing to attack. The body of Liu Cheng began to emit a blue energy, and he remained still without making any movement. He opened his eyes and his gaze fixed on her. He used his power and his body began to emit powerful blue flames. These flames transformed into his own clones, which, without much effort, started to fight against Sam and Kina's clones, defeating them if it were nothing. Liu Xiang's eyes filled with emotion, and with a smile, he praised her, saying that her ability was quite good. Sam and Kina began to walk towards him, and with each step she took, the energy around her body became more intense. Liu Xian, who was standing in front of her, began to observe and mentioned that the advancement from Grand Master level 8 to Martial Saint level 9 depended on the complete fusion of energy. mind, and spirit in order to connect with heaven and earth, using the energy of the natural universe to form the manifestation of one's martial path. He realized that she only lacked the final mark of her martial path. Sam and Kina placed her hand on her waist, started walking towards him, and with a serene expression, realized why everyone had died at his hands. Lu Cheng took this as a compliment. He started to touch his head with his hand, closed his eyes, and with a smile explained that if this was all she had to offer, then tonight she was not going to achieve anything. These words made Sam and Kina start to feel excited. She began to lick her lips and, with a smile, asked if the technique from before was his MasterCard. For her, this was a pity, since at one point he would not be able to keep talking like that. She extended her hand towards the sky, forming a powerful, shining ball of energy. According to her, Lu Sheng should feel lucky. She started to release a lot of energy, causing a magic circle to appear on the ground beneath her, and just then, a powerful lightning struck against her body. In these 5 years, he was the first to see her most powerful form, asking if he was ready to welcome death. She used her power and her body transformed. Now she was a unicorn. The upper part of her body was human. She had powerful claws and a horn on her head. Her energy began to disperse throughout the area, and far from being impressed, Lu Sheng acted as if nothing had happened. With a calm look, he asked her if she was another expert. This made her angry. She moved at great speed and, in the blink of an eye, appeared in front of him, started staring at him intently, and prepared to attack. Seeing how fast she was, Lu Chen was somewhat impressed just before he could react. She delivered a strong kick to his chest, causing his body to be launched into the air. She used her power again, and in an instant, appeared in the sky right above Lu Chen. With a smile, she prepared to attack again. She intertwined her hands and delivered a strong blow to the defenseless Liu Sheng in the chest, causing his body to shoot downwards and crash against the ground, destroying the area into pieces. While her eyes were shining, she began to inhale a powerful energy and asked the mortal Lu Shenghang to die. A purple magic circle appeared in the air. She blew, and a powerful burst of energy shot out from the magic circle towards the area where Lu Cheng was. Her attack was so powerful that the ground broke into pieces. Several seconds passed and nothing happened. As the smoke curtain was disappearing, Sam Kina descended a little, began to observe the attack area, and thought that it was all over since he was dead. But to her surprise, once the smoke curtain started to disappear, Lu Sheng's figure became visible. He mocked her, asking if the transformation only raised a little bit the limit of the Grand Master, revealing that she hadn't even touched the level of Grand Master. Upon seeing that Lu Cheng was still alive, Sam and Kina's expressions changed, and her eyes filled with fear, causing her to start sweating. She was very scared. She couldn't believe that he had been able to withstand the attacks while having the aura of a Grand Master. Lu Cheng emerged from the hole in the ground and began to advance towards her. Her attack had only torn a little part of his clothing. She didn't know how it was possible for him to be completely unscathed after receiving her full power attack, nor did she know who he really was. At that moment, Lu Cheng's body began to emit a golden energy. With a smile, he replied that he was about to touch the peak of the firmament. He clenched his fist tightly, started to stare at her, and gave her the order to die, since for him, she no longer had any value. Without making a sound, Lu Zhuan entered Lian Su's room. She extended her hand towards him and tried to ask for help, but he began to stare at her, and his eyes filled with revenge. This woman had tried to harm him several times and had even endangered his family, so he had no reason to feel pity. Although this method of assassination was cruel, he had no other option. Wen Su, who was lying on the bed, began to run out of air. Foam started coming out of her mouth, and her eyes filled with tears. She put one hand on her neck while extending the other, desperately trying to ask for help. Our boy started watching her, and upon seeing that she was suffering, he began to smile and mentioned that he wasn't any saint, just an ordinary person with some sense of justice and a bit of resentment. At that moment, a demonic energy appeared behind Lu Cheng. Upon feeling this energy, his eyes filled with fear and confusion. He knew better than anyone that this was not good. He lowered his head, and his gaze filled with terror, as only a martial saint could give him this sense of death threat. In a matter of seconds, Lioness began to faint and slowly started to close her eyes. He began to observe her and remembered that he had the ability of premonition, which warned him of possible crises that could affect him or those around him. A level 9 martial saint should have a similar ability, so it was time to change plans. While his body was emitting a blue energy, he began to extend his hand toward Lion Su. He couldn't continue torturing her, as it could attract the attention of the Supreme Martial Saint. If he got trapped here, it would be a big problem. He brought his hand closer to her and clenched his fist tightly, and without an ounce of compassion, decided to kill her right then. He began using his power, causing a powerful black energy to appear, which wrapped around Lion Su's neck, slowly suffocating her. Upon feeling this, she regained consciousness and tried to scream but was unable. With a calm look on his face, he decided to back off for now. That strange tension he felt in his forehead earlier, the one that made him feel something was off, had mostly disappeared. In a matter of seconds, Lioness lost her life, and at that moment, the maids began to approach the room. One of them asked the other to speak more quietly since she was sleeping. Upon hearing this, Lu Cheng began to use his power and disappeared from the room at the speed of light. Slowly, one of the maids, who was holding a tray with a glass of water, opened the door, and their eyes filled with confusion as they did not know what was happening. Not long after, they realized what had really happened, and the maid dropped the tray on the floor, causing the glass to break. Panic flooded everything, and they started screaming, informing that Lion Su had died. At the same time, in the province of Kyoto, was the mansion of the Chen family, where Ling Su's grandfather's birthday was going to be celebrated. The mansion was full of important and powerful people. Among the crowd, there were two women talking to each other. The sexy woman with pink hair put her hand near her mouth and, with a happy look, revealed that even a martial arts master had come to celebrate old Chen's birthday. For her, it was a great honor. The woman with gray hair crossed her arms, closed her eyes, and, with a smile, mentioned that old Chen was a master of martial arts who knew many important people. Some of his friends were even level 8 grandmasters in the army. 3 beautiful women appeared, and they began to show kind smiles. None of them had ever seen an 8th level master, and upon hearing that an 8th level master was going to be present, they decided to make an effort tonight, since if they managed to capture the attention of someone important, they would win a big prize. Among the crowd was also Luxu. Her expression showed disappointment. She couldn't believe this was high society. The women started enjoying the birthday party, while on the other side, Luxu crossed her arms and, with a calm look, thought that this was very boring and remained silently observing. While she was lost in her thoughts, someone extended a hand towards her and noticed that it was Ling Su's first time being part of such an important party. Realizing that she wasn't used to it, she advised her to enter together. Upon hearing this, she snapped out of her trance and, with a surprised look, began to wonder what was happening. He was her cousin, named he, a tall man with long hair. He extended his hand towards her and invited her to enter the party together, but she started shaking her head and, with a nervous expression, refused, since she was waiting for a friend, asking him to go in first and that she would enter in a while. He started to observe her and couldn't help but feel somewhat surprised, since he didn't expect her to have friends in Kyoto. The man decided to meet her friend later. After saying this, he put his hands behind his back, turned his back on her, and began to walk away. She began to look at the man inside, and with a sad look, thought that ever since she had arrived home, the attitude of the Chen family had been quite kind. Chenny had also been very attentive with her, but she always felt that he was not someone trustworthy. While she was distracted, someone asked if she believed that this guy wasn't a good person and had other intentions. Upon hearing this, she snapped out of her thoughts and with a confused expression, began to wonder what was going on. Someone wearing a white shirt started approaching Lingshu. She began to turn around and with an earnest look explained that she had that feeling. This person was none other than Lu Sheng. She turned around and upon seeing him, became happy and couldn't help but smile when she realized he had really come. Lu Sheng approached her, closed his eyes, and with a smile, reminded her that he had promised to be there to support her, and naturally, he had to keep his word. He began to observe her with a calm gaze. He was very proud of himself. From Lion Su's mansion to the Chen family mansion, there were at least about 1,000 kilometers of distance. He had covered that distance in less than 5 minutes, being 10 times faster than the speed of sound. Realizing that this spiritual power was very good, Lingsu closed her eyes and with a sincere expression, she mentioned that she didn't need him to back her up, as this wasn't like in novels, revealing that in reality, the Chen family had treated her quite well, although there was still some distance between them. They had already begun trying to accept her. She opened her eyes and with a sad gaze, she began to look to the side. But at that moment, our boy approached and with a serious expression, revealed that what they were trying to accept was her fortune. She raised her head, placed her hand near her chest, started observing him, and her eyes filled with surprise. She began to gaze at the ground and explained that returning always requires paying a corresponding price. Our boy remained calm. He had thought that Lingsu had a personality that would make her fight until the end, but he hadn't thought that in the end she would choose to give in. Considering the environment in which she had grown up, maybe she really needed a fake family to fill the void in her heart, and although he could understand it, it didn't mean he was going to approve of it. He turned his head back, and with a firm look, decided not to think about the matter and make a better decision for her tonight. While he was observing something behind him, Lingsu placed one hand over her chest, extended the other to one side, and with a confused expression asked what he meant by this and what he was looking for. Lu Cheng found his target, and with a smile, mentioned that he was looking for an unfortunate person who shone brightly. Upon hearing this, Lingsu's gaze filled with confusion and surprise. She began to sweat, as she didn't know what Lu Sheng had in mind. With a calm look, Lu Sheng started to stare at his target and asked her who that guy was. She turned her head to the side, began observing the target, and remained silently thinking. A man who seemed quite wealthy appeared. Beside him were 2 beautiful women. Seeing that young Master Ju had arrived, the butlers bowed their heads before him and welcomed him with a smile, indicating for him to enter the party. Ju started walking towards the entrance. Lu Sheng and Lingsu began to observe him, and she revealed that this guy was Ju Yumin, the second son of the Ju family. The Ju family was one of the most influential families around Kyoto. They even had a bit more power than her Chen family. This guy wasn't a big deal, after all. He was just a playboy. But on the other hand, his older brother, Zhuo Jian, was indeed someone important. Upon hearing that she had just said she was part of the family, Lu Cheng started looking at her, and it caught his attention. She became nervous and her gaze filled with surprise. She didn't know what was happening. Lu Sheng took her hand and explained that she was being surrounded by useless things, just obstacles that would smooth out her path toward true strength. He closed his eyes and, with a kind smile, asked her not to worry since he was going to take care of solving all this perfectly for her. Seeing that Lu Zhuan had taken her hand, Ling Su began to blush like a tomato. Lu Sheng let go of her hand, turned his back on her, and with a confident smile, started walking away. Ling Su was left frozen, her expression filled with confusion. Two men approached, the older man, who was from the real estate agency, and the other man tried to talk to him, but Zhu closed his eyes, started shaking his head, and with a tired expression, ordered them to leave. At that moment, someone appeared in front of him. Zhu extended his hand forward and, with an angry look, ordered him to step aside. This was none other than Lu Chen. He didn't even pay attention to him, and, with a calm expression, remained silent. Upon seeing Lu Cheng, Zhu's gaze filled with surprise, and he couldn't help but be left speechless. Lu Cheng began to stare at Zhu with a piercing look, making him start to feel fear. It didn't take long for him to realize that his physique, his appearance, his bearing, everything about him exuded an oppressive sensation that left one breathless. The arrogant Zhu ran out and hid behind some women, leaving them somewhat confused. With a serious look, he asked our boy who he was. Behind them was a luxurious car. Lu Cheng moved to the side, started looking at the car with a curious gaze, and asked if it was his car. Zhu put his arm around the women's necks and, with an angry look, replied yes and asked why he was asking that. With a surprised look, Lu Sheng thought the car was very nice and asked how much it had cost him. Zhu began to observe Lu Sheng and couldn't help but start smiling. He felt relieved, knowing that this talkative guy had only approached because his new car had caught his attention. Zhu crossed his arms, closed his eyes, and with a proud smile explained that he had bought this car for more than 80 million, and obviously it was something special since there was only one in all of Dragon Country. Upon hearing that this car was worth more than 80 million, Lu Sheng's gaze filled with joy, and he couldn't help but start smiling. Lu Sheng approached the car and with an incredulous expression began to touch it. Zhu, who had his arms crossed, approached him and started smiling as his gaze filled with joy upon realizing that he was a true talker. Lu Sheng began to gaze at the ground and, with a smile, praised the car but apologized with a serious look. He started to release a powerful blue energy and said that this car made him feel a bit envious. Upon feeling this, Zhu was somewhat confused and went on alert, as he didn't know what was happening. Without thinking for even a second, Lu Xian jumped on top of the car, crushing it as if it were a can. Seeing this, both Zhu and the other guests were in shock while the car was emitting smoke. Lu Xian got off it, started observing it, and couldn't help but smile, mentioning that now he felt a little better. Obviously, Zhuo didn't like this. He got angry, put his hand on Lu Sheng's shoulder, and with a look full of rage, gritted his teeth, called Lu Sheng a friend, and asked what he meant by this and if he was looking for trouble. Lu Sheng started to look at the ground and remained silent. Lu Sheng began to release energy, turned around, and with a piercing gaze, asked who Zhuo was calling friend. Upon feeling the energy, Zhuo started to back away and realized that this wasn't good. Lu Cheng's energy began to expand everywhere. Zhuo started looking up at the sky, and upon seeing this, he was left speechless as his gaze filled with fear while Lu Cheng's body was surrounded by suffocating energy. He turned around and with a serene expression introduced himself as Ling Su's friend from the Chen family, adding that if he was upset, then he was welcome to seek him out whenever he wanted to settle things. Zhu began to retreat. Lu Cheng started pointing backward, and with a serious look, revealed that Ling Su was behind them. Everyone's eyes filled with fear and curiosity, and they all turned around, asking why he had so much audacity behind them. Was he Ling Su? She started pointing at herself, and upon seeing that Lu Cheng was blaming her for everything, she got nervous. Zhuo's car, which Liu Shang had crushed, was now in flames. Pores of sweat formed on his forehead as he put his hands on his head and started screaming in panic. On the other side, our boy silently watched. Everything was going according to his plan. Ling Su, whose eyes were filled with confusion, began to sweat. She didn't know how to explain this or why Liu Cheng was acting this way. Shou fell to his knees on the ground and began crying. Ling Su, who was behind Liu Shang, started watching him with an expression filled with panic because she knew this wasn't good now that the situation had escalated. Liu Shang closed his eyes, began hitting one hand with the other, and with a smile, apologized to Zhuo, explaining that he couldn't control the feeling of envy. Obviously, this made Zhuo furious. He turned his head towards them, and while his body trembled and his face was full of tears, he wore an expression filled with vengeance and fury. He swore to remember the names of Ling Su and Lu Shang to make them pay for this in the future. Ling Su, who began pointing at herself with her finger and a confused expression, asked why she was being involved in this if she had nothing to do with it. Just before she could continue talking, Lu Shang gently placed his hand on her hip, closed his eyes, started walking towards the mansion, and with a confident smile, asked her not to pay attention to them. Ling Su, who put her hand over her chest, couldn't help but panic and started sweating profusely while Zhuo was still kneeling on the ground lamenting the loss of his luxury car. Liu Cheng and Ling Su began walking towards the entrance of the mansion. A white-haired man who was at the scene began to observe them, and his gaze filled with fear. He didn't know who Liu Cheng and Ling Su were or how they had dared to provoke the second young master of the Jewel family. According to him, Liu Cheng was an impressive person who always left people wanting more after spending time with him. Ling Su, who had entered the luxurious mansion filled with important guests, now stood inside, visibly upset. She placed her hand on Luqi's chest and gave him a push. With a serious expression, she asked him what he was trying to do. Liu Cheng remained calm, silently observing her as he thought things through. He knew that if he couldn't convince her, everything could fall apart. Ling Su, visibly furious and burning with rage, reminded him that he had just wrecked Duo's car and provoked him without any reason. Worse, he had dragged her into it, getting her in trouble as well. Our boy didn't lose his composure. He started to smile, and with a calm expression, said it didn't matter because he just wanted to lend her a hand. Ling Su's mind was filled with questions. She placed her hands on her hips, stared at him, and asked why he wanted to help her. What had they ever done for him to defend her like that? She told him to at least give her a reason. Lu Shang watched her with a faint smile. After a few seconds, he rested his hand under his chin, looked away, and began searching for a reason in his mind. Seeing this, Ling Su grew even more irritated. But then, to her surprise, Liu Cheng suddenly started imagining Zhao capturing her and having his own twisted fun with her later that night. Our boy stepped closer to her, pointed his finger, and with a confident expression, explained that judo seemed like nothing more than a playboy. Today, she looked especially beautiful and had dressed in a way that would definitely catch his attention. That guy was bound to have bad intentions, and he would do whatever it took to get her. Yu Lingshu's eyes filled with fear and confusion, and just before she could process what he said, Lu Sheng gently placed his hand on her head. He moved closer, looked into her eyes, and with a kind smile, said that this was how things always went in novels. He explained that he was only trying to prevent a disaster from happening, and added that there was no need for her to thank him. Hearing this, she looked even more confused than before. With a dazed expression, the innocent Yi Lingshu, who believed everything Liu Cheng was saying, simply replied, yes. She gave him a thumbs up, watched him closely, and with a serious expression, praised him, saying he was incredible. In the main hall of the mansion, elegant tables were arranged for the guests to enjoy their meals. The party was about to begin, and the guests began arriving one after another. Some were wealthy businessmen, others were powerful and widely known. Among them was a man wearing earrings. He was Jewel, holding a pen in his hand. As their eyes met, he began silently observing Liu Cheng. Meanwhile, Liu Cheng and Yi Lingshu were happily chatting when her cousin, Chen, appeared. He looked at Lush and couldn't help but smile, having been searching for them for quite some time. In the blink of an eye, the room filled with people. Chen walked over to them, closed his eyes briefly, and greeted Yi Lingshu with a warm smile. Upon hearing his voice, they stopped talking and all attention turned toward him. Chen approached them, stared at our boy, extended his hand, and smiled. Since Yi Lingshu wasn't going to introduce her friend, he mentioned that he had heard our boy had taken Jewel's car, and also blamed the Chen family. He was quite impressed. Lu Sheng didn't lose his composure. He began observing Chen with a calm expression, silently wondering who this guy was. Yi Lingshu started sweating, her face filled with indecision. She didn't know what to say about it. Lu Sheng closed his eyes, placed a hand over his mouth, and asked him to stop praising him. With a smile, he thought to himself that the way he spoke was quite interesting. Seeing Liu Cheng's attitude, Chen's gaze filled with confusion. He began staring at him, wondering why he was laughing. Liu Shen opened his eyes, and as a penetrating aura began to radiate from his body, he stared at Chen, asking if he was insinuating something. Feeling Lu Sheng's overwhelming presence, Chen couldn't help but shiver, realizing he was dealing with someone extraordinary. Growing tense and confused, he instinctively stepped back, his nerves flaring as he couldn't quite grasp what was happening. Seeing Yi Lingshu standing next to Lu Sheng left him somewhat confused. The fearful expression on her face, filled with anxiety, made him lower his gaze to the ground. Sweat began to bead on his forehead. Though he was a respectable level 6 warrior, he couldn't withstand even a single glance from Liu Cheng. Liu Cheng stared at Chen in silence. A level 8 master was nothing compared to him. Realizing that messing with Lu Sheng was a bad idea, Chen didn't hesitate. He turned his back on them and fled the area, drenched in sweat. As he ran, he swore that Liu Cheng would regret what he had done today. Chen thought he was finally out of danger, but when he looked down, his eyes filled with fear. He couldn't understand why his legs had stopped moving. Suddenly, his body began to float. He struggled to move, but nothing worked. He had no idea why he was rising into the air or who was behind it. Of course, it was Liu Cheng. Calmly, he raised his hand and activated his mental strength, causing Chen's body to lift higher off the ground. Liu Cheng mocked him, asking if he really thought he could escape. Chen panicked as he realized Liu Cheng was behind it all. He broke into a heavier sweat and turned to Yi Lingshu, trying to ask for help. She and the others watched in silence, completely stunned. Liu Sheng's body began to radiate an intense aura, and with a sharp glare, he questioned if Chen was insinuating something and why he was spouting nonsense. Just before Liu Cheng could make a move, Yi Lingshu stepped in. She clenched her fists and, with a furious expression, demanded that he put Chen down and stop causing trouble. Liu Sheng looked at her calmly and stayed silent for several seconds. Then he closed his eyes and chose to listen. Turning his head slightly, he flicked his finger, sending Chen Yi's body flying to the side. With a smile, he said that Yi Lingshu's wishes were like orders to him. She panicked the moment she realized Liu Cheng had thrown him straight into the banquet hall. Chen Yi's body slammed into the banquet table, sending dishes and drinks flying from the force of the impact. Within seconds, he let out a faint sound before losing consciousness. The guests rushed over to see what had happened and were horrified when they saw him lying there, completely unconscious. Yi Lingshu's eyes were filled with fear. She lost her composure, covered her face with her hands, and stared ahead in despair. Everything she had worked so hard for over the years felt like it had been ruined in an instant. Just then, someone called out for the crowd to move aside, announcing that the second son of the Jewel family would take care of the situation. Upon hearing the voice, Yi Lingshu and Liu Cheng turned their attention to the side. Both looked surprised, unsure of what was going on. A group of furious guards appeared, and leading them was the second son of the Jewel family. He clenched his fists tightly, clearly irritated, thinking to himself that these people were nothing but trouble. He pointed directly at Liu Cheng, his eyes burning with anger, and shouted that he was the one responsible. Staring hard at him, he called Liu Cheng an arrogant brat who knew nothing about the real world. He asked if Liu Cheng seriously believed that winning first place in the national tournament and having a bit of talent made him someone important. Liu Sheng silently observed Zhou, saying nothing. On the other side, Yi Lingshu clutched her chest, her eyes filled with fear, thinking things were going south fast. With a smug grin, Jewel scoffed that Zhou had simply fallen into Sheng's trap. He called him a little coward and told him to get ready to die. Then, Jewel's gaze shifted toward the beautiful healer, Su. He licked his lips and told her to wait. Once he was done with Liu Sheng, she'd find out exactly how he planned to treat her. Upon hearing this, she felt a chill run down her spine. With a nervous expression, she thought to herself that this was not good at all. On the other side, Liu Cheng crossed his arms and smiled. Yi Lingshu, the adopted daughter of the Chen family, would remember that if it weren't for the Chen family's interest in her business, Liu Xiang probably wouldn't even have the right to be at the banquet. Just as the situation was about to escalate, someone in the crowd raised their hand and called out to Yi Lingshu. Her attention shifted and she looked somewhat confused. Yi Lingshu's mother, dressed in an elegant gown, stepped forward with a furious expression. She demanded to know where Yi Lingshu had found such friends and whether she planned to throw Liu Cheng out. She added that if Yi Lingshu wanted to return to the Chen family, she needed to make Liu Cheng leave immediately. The mother tightly grasped Yi Lingshu's hand, and the two began to move away from the commotion. The woman looked back and, with a sincere expression, asked her to come with her, saying they would apologize to the second son of the Zhou family afterward to clear up the misunderstanding. Yi Lingshu, feeling uncertain, started to think about what to do next. Just before she could make a decision, Liu Sheng caught her attention. With a confident smile, he reminded her that he had already told her it was just like in novels. She was the prototype heroine. She would find herself in situations like this, becoming the target of everyone, attacked and weighed down by it all. In the end, a villain would appear to rescue her. Upon hearing Liu Chang's voice, she turned her head back, while on the other side, the mother got angry and started cursing him. Liu Chang moved at great speed and made Yi Lingshu disappear, leaving the mother somewhat confused and terrified at the same time. He saved her from her mother's clutches, placed his hand on her shoulder, closed his eyes, and with a smile mentioned that there would be no need for a villain to come save her since she had him. Yi Lingshu, her gaze filled with fury, demanded to know what he was doing and pointed out that this was all his fault. The mother, losing her composure, became angry. With a look full of rage, she told Yi Lingshu to listen to her, ordering her to cut all contact with him and come with her. She promised that the family would protect her and forgive this mistake. Instead of paying attention to her mother, Yi Lingshu, with an uncertain expression, began observing Liu Chang. Far from taking the Cheng family's side, she stood firm and, with a determined look, asked Mrs. Chen for forgiveness, explaining that she could not accept the conditions she had offered. Her mother, caught off guard, became furious. She began pointing at them with her finger, called Yi Lingshu spoiled, and ordered the guards to catch them both. Liu Cheng hugged her, his expression calm, and reassured her not to worry, promising she wouldn't regret this decision. He added that what followed would be the most exciting part, revealing that it was time to teach them a good lesson. Having Liu Sheng so close made Yi Lingshu blush deeply. She couldn't believe he was doing all of this for her. This is the end of this video from chapter 160 to chapter 170. If you wish to watch the next video with another 10 chapters, please don't forget to subscribe.